Hey, great to have you here. So today we'll be discussing the fourth episode of Alien Earth. As a quick reminder, if you enjoy hanging out and talking alien, please consider subscribing to the channel for more future content. So right away in this episode, there's this opening recap and title card, but during this we also get a scene of this doll head washing up on this beach. I'm not entirely sure of the significance here yet, but let me know if you picked up on something here. Maybe it's signifying the transition of these hybrids going from being these kids to real and powerful threats, essentially leaving behind childhood things like dolls and even maybe ripping the head off of it. And then jumping into the actual episode, we get some more lore building with the room of Wendy, Curly, Kavalier, Kirsh, both Sylvia's. After a little bit of discussion, Dame and Kirsh wind up leaving and eventually are replaced with Joe and Ains here, so pretty much most of the Prodigy cast are here in this scene. And they're trying to test Wendy's capabilities of communicating with these alien life forms, and during this time, Kavalier is continuing to exert his social status, primarily over Joe and Arthur, making it clear that he's the boss. Kavalier winds up asking Wendy to replicate that frequency that she's hearing in her head so that the rest of them in the room can hear it too. He tells her to pretty much operate as if she's a speaker, projecting the sound of them, which she does successfully do. And afterwards, we also get Kavalier make some comment to Curly saying something like, "You can speak French, but how about that?" And really continuing that jealousy angle of Wendy being favored compared to the other hybrids, which is added further by Joe, her family, being here with her. Wendy then is told to take it easy, so she goes to show Joe her room, and their relationship gets a little bit more development here, where they talk about things like how Joe wasn't allowed to meet with Wendy in the past. We then transition to a bit of a montage of Kavalier reading Peter Pan, which continues to be a staple theme in this show, while at the same time we pick back up with the Slightly and Morrow storyline. Slightly's out in the middle of nowhere, and we have Morrow talking to him through his head. As expected, he asks Slightly to steal one of the alien eggs for him. He's continuing to try to manipulate Slightly by saying it's not stealing, since it was originally stolen from him. And here we also have Morrow tell Slightly that he can't tell anyone about this in their relationship, but the fact that Slightly already hasn't blabbed about Morrow feels like a conflicting character trait based on what we've seen from Slightly thus far. In the beginning of the show, he was pitched as being not able to keep any secret, telling everybody about Wendy and Joe's relationship. So I don't know why they really had those scenes early on, if we're just going to abandon that part of his personality at this point. Morrow also asks what Slightly's real full name is, and even though Slightly knows he's not supposed to do so, he foolishly gives it to Morrow, which I guess this is an instance of Slightly not being able to keep a secret. It's pretty obvious here though, that sharing this information is going to come back to bite Slightly. And when Slightly comes back inside, he's approached by Kirsh, and it's pretty obvious here that Kirsh knows what's going on, which I'm glad they don't have everyone in Prodigy seeming totally ignorant to what the hybrids are up to. Slightly doesn't tell Kirsh about Morrow though, once again seemingly altering his character's personality. Maybe this is supposed to be some kind of character growth as far as keeping secrets, but I don't know if I fully believe that excuse though. We then do get one of the cooler scenes of this episode, where Kirsh and one of the hybrids, Toodles, who gets a lot of screen time this episode, put this eyeball creature in a cage with this sheep, and we see the eyeball take over the sheep's body, replacing itself as one of the sheep's eyes. And this scene definitely gave me some Jurassic Park vibes with the whole goat sacrifice in the first film, and Kirsh learns here that this creature is highly intelligent as it watches everybody from inside this cage. Kavalier is also watching things here and is treating this like another one of his shiny new toys. He's definitely getting a bit careless, which will likely be Prodigy's downfall eventually. We then do get some more character development between Arthur and Dame Sylvia, who are out alone talking. Arthur addresses how reckless Kavalier is being, but Dame mostly is defending the boy genius here. This definitely seems to be foreshadowing though, since Arthur mentions they need to figure out what to do if everything goes to hell. And then Nibs, one of the hybrids who, in one of the earlier episodes, seemed to be going through some existential crisis, then pops up and talks about being pregnant for some reason. Her and Dame go off alone, and Nibs is giving major loose cannon vibes. And this was probably the most tense scene of the episode, which is kind of surprising since it didn't include any alien creatures, but Nibs is acting like she's similar to Jesus' mother Mary, who got pregnant on her own. And then when Dame asks her about what happened with the eyeball creature at that crash site, Nibs doesn't want to discuss it at all and freaks out, lunging at Dame and physically threatening her. Dame tries to de-escalate things and casually walks over to pretend to make some tea and hits the secret button on the desk though to call security because she's finally realizing how crazy Nibs is getting. We then get a scene between Joe and Ains. Ains pretty much states that Joe is required to stay there and serve Prodigy if he wants to stay alive with his new lung and remain in Wendy's life. Joe initially resists this, but eventually does comply. We also get some pretty deep philosophical conversation here, and it's really throughout this whole episode They discuss if Wendy is actually Marcy or just a copy of her consciousness. It really dove into the humanity of sentient beings and what it truly means to be a human. If anyone's played the game Detroit Become Human, definitely gave me some similar vibes there, where the distinction between androids and humans starts to become a little bit gray. Wendy then meets up with Kavalier, and he continues the Peter Pan analogies, acting like her fighting the xenomorph earlier on the season was like Peter Pan fighting the crocodile, and her being able to hear these alien frequencies is like the crocodile ticking in her brain. Kavalier also feeds some doubt in her head about how much her brother truly cares about her since he never came to see her before, trying to really separate the two of them, even though that pretty clearly wasn't Joe's fault. We then cut to the hybrid Toodles and Kirsh talking. Toodles decides he wants to be named Isaac now after Isaac Newton, and Kirsh is just kind of like, okay, sure, whatever. So earlier this season, we had Curly wanting to advance her own mind, and in this episode, it seems like we're getting the same situation from Toodles or Isaac or whatever you want to call him. Toodles then leaves the lab and runs into Slightly and tells him about changing his name to Isaac, saying that he decided this all on his own, which is starting to give these hybrids their own empowerment and decision making. Slightly then walks away to go talk to Morrow and tell him that he can't get one of these eggs, and here we see that Kirsh is fully listening in on their conversation. Morrow continues to try to pressure Slightly, and we see that due to Slightly sharing his real name previously, Morrow is now with Slightly's mom because of this, and Slightly is pretty forced to comply with Morrow's wishes at this point. Morrow also has a change in the mission that he has for Slightly. Instead of bringing an egg, he now wants a facehugger from one of the eggs to jump out and onto a human face, and to bring that to him instead. Which at this moment, I'm thinking Joe may be in danger. And we show Kirsh again, who has now fully heard this conversation, but he doesn't tell anybody about it, and doesn't send anybody over to capture Morrow, which seems like he could pretty easily do, since he knows that Morrow's at Slightly's family's house. They do also show Kirsh touching one of the alien eggs, and I'm wondering at this point if Kirsh is done with Kavalier belittling him and may switch sides here, giving Morrow what he wants, or at least maybe letting one of these aliens loose, but that's just a guess for now. We then get a fun scene of all the hybrids hanging out and talking, except for Slightly here. Toodles talks about teaching himself skills, similar to like in The Matrix when Neo programmed himself to learn Kung Fu. Curly asks Joe about the 5 governments, so we get the full explanation of the 5 groups that currently run the Earth again, like we did in episode 1 on the Magano. So we have Wendy and Yutani, Prodigy, Threshold, Dynamic, and Lynch. But within this show thus far, we've only really covered the first 2 in depth with Wendy and Yutani and Prodigy. We also get a little bit of kid banter here, like Curly telling Toodles if he loves the aliens so much, why doesn't he just marry them? Slightly does eventually join the group here and complains about Joe getting to be here and says it's not fair that Wendy gets special treatment, once again giving my fear that Joe could be Slightly's planned sacrifice. Joe does agree with Slightly though and says that it's not fair, they should all get to have their families there with them, so maybe Joe will be kept safe after all, we'll have to see. We then get our last scene of the episode with Wendy in the lab, staring at Joe's lung in this container that we saw at the end of last episode. We see that the creature inside the lung starts to move around a little bit and eventually busts out of it and busts through the glass at Wendy. And sure enough, this looks to be a baby xenomorph head. I will say it looks kind of silly, but that's fine. And Wendy starts to communicate with it, and eventually it lets her actually pet it. So at this point, she is fully connected with these creatures. We also do have Kirsh in the background watching and not doing anything, so I'm wondering here if he is going to turn on Prodigy. And suddenly a Jane's Addiction song cuts in here, and as we know, this means it's time for the credits to roll. So overall in this episode, there weren't really any action sequences, and you could say it's a little bit of a fillerish of an episode, but there were some really great world building moments. We did get some pretty tense scenes though with Nibs or the sheep, but I wish they would have ended off the episode with some sort of action cliffhanger. It is interesting though that we thought these alien specimens were the major threat that needed to be monitored, but it's starting to seem like the hybrids are becoming equally as problematic, especially since unlike the specimens, they're mostly walking around freely and becoming more independent. And someone definitely needs to be watching the hybrids more. I guess Dame is now watching Nibs, but after that incident, you would think that every hybrid would be monitored or contained. I assume this is all going to come down to the hubris of man, mostly with Boy Kavalier, thinking that him and his brain are too big to fail until it all comes crashing down. As mentioned, I do wonder if Kavalier has pushed Kirsh's buttons a little bit too much, and when we had Kirsh talking down about humans in episode 1, that makes me think he may switch teams here, like we've seen with so many androids in past alien stories. Most of the scenes with Kirsh in this episode, he's just kind of standing there in the background, taking everything in and looking very intense. So looking at an overall score here on a scale of negative, neutral, or positive for this episode, episode 4, I may surprise you here and say that this gets a positive rating. Coming into the season, I would have thought I would need some intense alien scenes to earn a positive review, but I really liked how they filled in some gaps in the characters' backstories here. It made me actually interested in the non-Wendy hybrids. But I will say, we definitely need some level of alien carnage next episode in order to keep people interested, since we really didn't get that in this or the prior episode. But those are some of my thoughts on episode 4 of Alien Earth. If you've watched it, what did you think? What parts did you like or dislike? Let me know where you think things are headed next, or where you'd like to see things go. Do you think these hybrid kids, along with Kirsh, are going to lead to Prodigy's downfall? It's almost starting to feel like a Frankenstein situation, where the creations overthrow the creator. I do expect some combination of Kirsh, slightly Nibs, Wendy, or whoever else to let the aliens loose, which will start to crack the fragile foundation of Prodigy. But as usual, let me know your thoughts on all things alien down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.